In this guide, we'll be going over 6 tips that can really improve your general performance as a healer in Final Fantasy XIV. Naturally, these tips will be generally helpful for all healers, and so may include job-specific examples, but will be applicable to all or most healers. Let's start with the first tip on how to deal with pulls in a dungeon. As a healer, this can be approached in 3 parts: before the pull, during the pull, and finishing the pull, which includes killing the enemies. First, before the pull begins, consider any options your job has that can be helpful before engaging a fight. Barrier healers can find it helpful to apply a shield to the tank. Pure healers can apply a heal over time effect. Note that heal over time effects generate no enmity with their healing. Scholars may want to be sure their pet is summoned, and astrologians, as a significant outlier, can prepare extra by drawing a card early and setting up horoscope if given the chance. The intention of this pre-pull preparation is to minimize the amount of defensive spells you need to cast while enemies are present. Additionally, take note that if you use sprint before you enter combat, it lasts twice as long compared to if you use it once you enter combat. For this reason, I highly recommend either using sprint before you use an action on the tank when they are in combat, or before using an attack of your own. Alternatively, if the tank also uses sprint early, I recommend using sprint when they do, such that you are sure to be able to keep up with them. While the tank is pulling mobs, pure healers may prefer to apply dots to all the enemies one at a time as they run with a group, while using ability healing to keep the tank safe if necessary. Often, it isn't. Barrier healers can instead choose to use their AoE attack as they run with a group, similarly using their abilities to keep the tank up. Specifically, astrologians and white mages may find it helpful to apply their ability-based shield to the tank, while scholars may want to use excogitation. It is important to wait until you are in combat for that, as it generates fairy gauge if you are in combat when using it. When the tank reaches their destination, we go to the final step: finishing the pull. Each healer may want to place down whatever dome or ground targeted effect covering the area they have, and apply anything to the tank that they need to be safe while you attack as much as you can. This might sound counterintuitive as a healer, but I will get back to this, trust me. This means astrologians should definitely place down their earthly star, white mages can put down their asylum if it is available, and scholars can place sacred soil. Sage can simply use Keraholi. The general game plan is to keep the tank alive with abilities such that you can use your spells to deal as much damage as you can, ending the fight more quickly. Naturally, if it becomes necessary, using healing spells should still be considered a backup option. Specifically for white mages, if you need to weave something while you're using Holy, consider using Dia or even a Lily spell to find space to weave the abilities you need. If you want a more specific example of what each healer can do to optimize their performance in a dungeon pull, I have 4 shorts demonstrating how to get the most out of your toolkit as each healer that I will put in the iCards in the top right and in the description. To summarize the pull, before the pull, you want to equip your tank with anything that can be helpful while they are pulling, but would take away from your ability to attack once enemies are present. You also want to use sprint here if you can. During the pull, you spread your dots to as many enemies as possible. Barrier healers can use AoE, and make use of any helpful healing abilities to keep your tank safe should they need it, and often they won't need that. Once the pull reaches its destination, bunker down and place your healing dome or star ability and use your abilities to try and make as much space for you to attack with spells as you can. Notably, white mages use Holy for the damage, and the stunning effect is simply a bonus, so don't worry too much about this. Usually, you should have enough healing options that you shouldn't need the stun anyway. The second tip is about actually healing efficiently. This becomes less of a concern the higher level you get and the more tools you get. However, to preserve as many tools as possible, this will always be important. There is no need to cast a healing spell or use a healing ability that isn't needed. What this means is that, for example, there is no reason to cast Cure just because your tank is missing HP in general. Keep track of how much your healing tools actually heal so that you use them when they are most effective. An exception to this can be healing over time effects like Regen and Aspected Benefic, but that doesn't mean that you need to, or even should, make sure to keep these effects up on the tank all the time, only if it is really needed. This is also why these kinds of effects are typically applied before fighting starts if possible. Another way to make your healing more efficient is to make sure to use the most effective spells in your arsenal. Notably, Cure 1, Medica 1, Physic, Benefic 1, Helios, Diagnosis, and Prognosis are all made almost completely redundant the moment you unlock the greater alternative to them. And as long as you're not in a situation where the tank needs healing right now to survive, healing over time effects like Regen and Aspected Benefic become greater than the more immediate solutions like Cure 2 and Benefic 2. The reason for these things is simply that a core part of playing a healer in Final Fantasy XIV is more about being efficient with your time and not so much about being efficient with your MP. In most situations, this should never become an issue. An additional way to use your healing tools more efficiently is to be more aware of what your tank is doing. All 4 tanks have ways to assist you in keeping them alive. As one specific and very common example, understanding why that warrior seems to be letting themselves drop really low without using a defensive cooldown. They will probably top up with bloodwetting momentarily, so you don't have to do anything. Yet. Well, sometimes the warrior can get too greedy on that, so still watch over them. All 4 tanks have different ways to maximize their toolkit, and learning how to play around each of them to maximize your performance will make you a better healer in general. Now, you may be wondering what on earth you're supposed to be doing with all this saved time, and that leads us to the 3rd tip, which is about attacking as a healer. Now that you're hopefully efficiently using your healing, you probably have a lot of free time where you aren't casting any healing. In fact, some healers might not be using any healing spells at all. Now, in Final Fantasy XIV, healers actually contribute quite a significant amount of the damage in a fight, alongside providing healing. Naturally, the damage a healer provides is far less than what a damage dealer can provide, but it is not entirely unreasonable to say that a healer can do half the damage of a damage dealer, meaning that choosing to attack as a healer can drastically reduce the total time a fight takes. All healers have extremely basic attack toolkits, typically amounting to a spammable spell, a dot to apply, and an AoE attack, with some of the healers having some extra additions on top. The general idea for a healer is to make sure their dot is active in a single target fight, and then simply use every free GCD they have available that they don't need for anything else on their single target spammable spell. In area of effect fights like dungeon pulls, everything is usually replaced with the AoE attack instead. How a healer is capable of still performing their role as a healer while being entirely dedicated to attacking is very simple. The spammable spell of a healer has a cast time of 1.5 seconds, which leaves enough room to weave an ability between each cast. For AoE, this is even easier for barrier healers as their AoE attack is instant, giving them space for double weaving. White Mage is the specific outlier here, as their holy spell leaves no space for weaving, which is the reason why I earlier recommended using other spells when you have to weave. What this means is that as you level up and get more abilities in your arsenal, you will get less and less reason to use regular healing spells, and they move over to more of a backup plan kind of position, or as tools to top up your party if the enemy is not attackable anyway. Naturally, sometimes a boss mechanic can require a specific answer that you can only provide with a spell, like how barrier healers primarily get their shields from spells. The idea is simply that you should try to minimize the amount of time you spend on healing as best you can, and then use any excess time you get from this for attacking. This can take a lot of practice to learn and master, so take it one step at a time. The 4th tip is about managing your resources in general. While MP is not an issue when playing well includes making use of your tools that grant you or save you MP, like Lucid Dreaming and job-specific options. Similarly, while the sheer amount of ability healing most healers have access to is so overwhelming that you should not really run out of them, outside maybe savage raiding situations, that is completely irrelevant if you use all of your ability options very inefficiently. For example, there's nothing preventing a Sage from reacting to raid-wide damage by using Fizzes, healing over time and a healing bonus, Keraholi, more healing over time and damage reduction, Panheimer, shields for the raid-wide and extra healing after the fact of course, and also Holos, more shields and even more damage reduction and healing. All of that is certainly going to help in that situation. But if you put all of these tools on cooldown at the same time for something that absolutely didn't call for this much of a reaction, then you will almost certainly be lacking options later. Each healer has a significantly different toolkit, and so a different response to damage. However, just like learning how much healing your actions do helps you to understand what needs to be used to keep your group alive, this also naturally applies to using your tools in general. Try and see if just one cooldown will suffice. Maybe you need 2, but if you use everything you have every time, then you simply won't have anything left. A core difference in toolkits between pure healers and barrier healers is that pure healers have a much more powerful basic spell toolkit, so they are not too dangerous to overuse cooldowns on. But barrier healers rely extremely heavily on their ability-based tools to keep the group alive, which means that, for example, a scholar can lock themselves out of the much more powerful enhanced sacred soil by overusing Lust Rate early in a fight, which then leads to even more healing being necessary, which in turn requires more cooldowns to respond with, like a domino effect, which is why it is so important to not overspend right out the gate. The 5th tip is about the limit break. Now, just to be sure, let me explain what it is. The limit break is a gauge that becomes available in group content, and it is a shared gauge, meaning that if any one person uses it, the entire party loses it. As such, it is important for the entire party to use it correctly. In a 4-player party, you have access to Limit Break 1 and unlock Limit Break 2 on the final boss of a dungeon. In 8 or more player content, you get access to Limit Break 3. Depending on what role you are, the Limit Break does something different. Tanks apply a raid-wide damage reduction effect, and the higher limit break stage, the greater it is. In most situations, the tank limit break is only needed for attacks that will wipe the raid specifically if you don't use the tank limit break, so typically you know when this happens. Melee DPS performs a heavy-hitting single-target attack, while ranged physical performs a line AoE, and mages perform a circle AoE. Generally, the AoE options are superior on 2 or more targets. The healer limit break, however, is the ultimate panic button. It almost instantly raises everyone in the party, fully heals them and maxes out their MP, and this type of raise does not apply the weakness debuff it normally would apply, meaning that the raised players won't be doing around 25% less damage for 2 minutes. Notably, everyone is immediately raised wherever their corpses are, which can cause some problems sometimes. Furthermore, it is not a raise that they can choose when to accept, and they are immediately brought back, which means watching out for boss mechanics is crucial for you. On top of this, and far more important for you, while the limit break raises everyone almost instantly, you are stuck in an animation lock for nearly 10 seconds where you can't use anything else or even move, meaning that you rely on your team to keep you alive as soon as they are back up. Given that your group shares the limit break, using the healer limit break directly sacrifices the opportunity to use the DPS limit break. However, as long as the healer limit break is used in a situation where it is beneficial enough for the group, it is better to use healer limit breaks over DPS limit breaks. My personal recommendation is this. If you have 3 or more players dead, and no one in the group is able to quickly raise anyone, meaning all swift casts are on cooldown and any potential red mage is otherwise incapable of assisting, then you use healer limit break. I believe at this point, the combination of instantly bringing these players back that otherwise might stay down for a minute or more, and the fact that they dodge a new weakness debuff greatly outweighs the damage of a DPS limit break when you consider the lost damage potential of the players being dead, and the tactical advantage of having more players alive, even if a DPS limit break does incredible damage. Naturally, who is dead also has an impact on how soon healer limit break can be necessary to break out. And for the 6th and final tip, which is about breaking your limits. As a healer, it can often feel like you're a captive audience to the amount of stuff your tank, and even sometimes your DPS, choose to pull. Now, sometimes when the group pulls far more than you feel you can manage, it can be very scary and intimidating, and often, sticking to the strategy you might normally use might simply not be enough. In those situations, it is okay to deviate from the strategy if you believe it can save the group from a wipe. For example, if you believe using an excess of healing spells might stabilize the group, then do that. If your tank suddenly needs massive healing out of nowhere, don't wait until the next GCD to do it if that is going to be too late. Despite the incredible focus there is on dealing damage for healers in the game, your primary purpose and most important task is to keep the group alive first and foremost. Just as an addition from the other side of the coin to finish, if your group is pulling too little. On the one hand, if you feel entirely confident in your ability to keep the tank alive through that, it should be fine to pull more for them, right? On the other hand, forcibly pulling more for your tank is likely to catch them off guard, and that may make them play unpredictably, including, but not limited to, letting the group die out of annoyance. For this reason, I recommend only suggesting to the tank that they can pull more, and I highly advise against pulling more for them, or using rescue to force them forward or similar pushy tactics. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support me and my channel, you can make sure to let the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. And if you want to give even more support than that, you can also become a member of the channel like these wonderful people here. Fun fact, before Endwalker, Astrologians had the ability to switch between being a pure healer or a barrier healer, as long as they were not in combat. This allowed them to prepare both a shield aspected Benefic or Helios, and a heal over time aspected Benefic or Helios. This can still be done with Neutral Sect nowadays, since it enables access to the now lost Nocturnal Sect effects of aspected Benefic and aspected Helios, although using a 2-minute cooldown for just that might be a bit steep of a cost.